there's a very important social equity and social justice component to this because public goods are shared by all where private goods are not. And we can go to town on the question of, to whom are cities more readily available and what do we do in an incredibly difficult cost environment. But fundamentally, when cities are working well, the public goods that cities make available are available across the income spectrum. And in particular, with respect to transportation, cities really excel at providing a sustainable framework. And of course, parks are absolutely critical also. Cities do not work without public space. Cities make urbanism possible, they make urbanism attractive. Parks make urbanism attractive. Open space is fundamental to the urban proposition. If you're going to ask someone to live without a private yard or garden, you better be providing the alternative. And to the extent that we do that, cities become that attractive proposition. People are willing to live with less space. They're willing to live without personal mobility. And indeed, they become really spectacularly wonderful, gracious civic environments at their best. And this is where all of us come in, working on parks and open space. It is critical to the climate agenda and to the future of how we live. We have to be willing to live among one another. And this is somewhat at odds with the traditional conservation mission of the National Park Service. I know that you wrestle every day with questions of balancing access and conservation, habitat values, use values, etc. These things become hyper-distilled and hyper-concentrated in an urban setting where there are more people, less space, more users. I need only say, dog plan, right? I mean, you're living this every day. It's very, very difficult to manage more intensively used environments with present, local, vocal voices as part of the conversation. But that is the urban proposition. That is learning to live with one another. Part of that is understanding that the era of single-purpose infrastructure is over. So through the 20th century, we built ever bigger, blanker, bleaker, single-purpose things like seawalls, like sewer plants, like freeways. And we assumed that we had enough space or could make enough space to have each of those things just serve one function. And increasingly we're realizing that we're space constrained, we're resource constrained, and if we put our minds to it, a city can be more like an ecosystem in which each element is in relation to many other elements and serving many other functions. So a street is not what we affectionately call in planning a traffic sewer, whose one function is to move cars. A street is also about moving buses and about moving bicycles and about moving people on feet. A street is also a civic gathering space. A street is also a habitat corridor. A street is also part of a stormwater management system that cleans the water and prevents flooding. And to the extent that we think in that way, think in a systems mode, and use every piece of infrastructure to have multiple functions, it makes us more resilient. It makes us more able to weather resource constraints, which we're all dealing with, but it also makes better places for us to live, and it allows us to solve our sustainability and environmental issues. And cities, I don't mean to paint too rosy a picture of cities, because although they are extremely efficient per capita, they are also intense concentrations of impact. Things like the urban heat island effect, things like the difficulty of maintaining biodiversity in the city. These are real challenges, even as we capture the efficiencies and civic benefits of cities. And kind of along those lines, I think one major conceptual shift that is happening today that is very interesting to think about is that the traditional conception of the city and wild places as opposites and mutually exclusive poles is eroding. That we no longer have nature over here and cities over here, people over here, critters over here. There is increasingly in our thinking, as well as in our practice, an interpenetration of nature in the city. And there's a lot of kind of challenging aspects to this. It can be very uncomfortable. I put this image up here because it's a competition entry by the architect Anne Fougeron from San Francisco. that was from a competition a few years back about the future of San Francisco 100 years out. And it's not a proposal, so don't get too alarmed if you live in any of these neighborhoods. But it's a speculative exercise, a sort of thought experiment. What if we thought of cities and ecological systems not as pointing in opposite directions, but as an integrated set of systems that inform one another? So you have the wetlands and waterways coming into the city from the bay, extending deep into different parts of the city. And then you have these vertical farms, these skyscraper towers with organic agriculture marching out into the bay. So in both directions you have this thing. And then there are some challenges with this, right? The traditional natural resources framework, conservation framework, is really about protecting resources from people. And this also presents some uncomfortable questions at a global level with respect to should we be sort of driving our planet, engineering our planet? Are we capable of that? And one way of thinking about that is, well, it's no longer a question of whether we're capable about it because we already are running it off the road, so we better figure out what the different gears and levers do and how we can do a better job. And I know that those of you who work in natural resources are already wrangling with these questions, that we already know there is no sort of absolute pristine nature. And there are all sorts of debates about whether you're reintroducing species or moving species around to accelerate their capacity to adapt to changing climate conditions, etc. These issues are very, very present. But again, these issues very much come to a head in an urban setting where you really cannot have a wild condition. But increasingly, we are not only able to provide incredible access to nature to urban dwellers, and that's a critical part of making cities work. And I should say that in San Francisco in particular, the GGNRA represents the best that the region has. I mean, I think from the point of view of public space and open space, San Francisco's a little weak at the local level, at the human scale. Our streets are kind of ugly. We have very few trees. Our local parks are a real mixed bag. We don't have a world-class open space system. There, I said it. Please don't be mad. Where we shine is in our encounter with the region. When you look out that window and you understand yourself situated on the tip of a peninsula in this spectacular setting, and you see the gamble of Amy Meyer and people for open space in the early 70s, that no, we did not have to develop all of these former military bases. We could create a national park here, and we did it. And now it seems inevitable in hindsight, right? But of course, it was anything but. It was a huge gamble and one that has paid off spectacularly. So even as we struggle to do better with our sort of immediate streets and open spaces, this national park is really the most successful linchpin of our ability to live an urban life, to encounter nature. And then increasingly on the flip side of this, we're getting better at bringing nature into the city. We're still working on it, but when we talk about living machines at the PUC headquarters, or we talk about Crissy Field and the reintroduction of the marsh there, we talk about low impact development, green infrastructure. We're starting to develop the system, the technology, the practice to actually do that. And it's very, very exciting.